Ugh, Silk Road? Fuck. Fine, I guess I'll play. Wait, why the hell are there so many tanks here? Ugh, I hate these stupid tanks.
Do you or someone you know keep encountering too many tanks at a time on Silk Road? Are you tired of being spawn killed by an IFV every time? Does the tank a mile away with staff shells cause you extreme rage? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then you need to call the offices of Jetrammers and Associates right now. Our expert pilots will collide with those pesky players so hard that only their gaming chairs will remain. Straight down, head on, even upside down. However you want it dead, we'll ram it dead. Satisfaction guaranteed. Nothing will leave you smiling more than seeing that enemy whine in the chat. But don't take our word for it. With quality reviews like these, you don't even need good players on your team. The offices of Jetrammers and Associates. If we can't Jetram it, there's always a C4 bike to spare. Call now.
While there are great maps in the 20-year history of the Battlefield franchise, there are also others that are dramatically imbalanced, poorly laid out, or simply disasters of design. This is the story of the worst maps of Battlefield. Silk Road is a Battlefield 4 map released as part of the China Rising DLC pack. It contains IFVs, tanks, sand, canyons, more tanks, sand, more IFVs, and more sand. It is known for these defining features as well as a few others: stealth jets, suicide bikes, and a 7-flag Conquest Large design. The neutral capture points have a 3-1-3 split across the length of the map, with the China team starting in the northwest and the US team starting on the southeast. Before we discuss anything else, we need to talk about the elephant in the desert. The two distinct terrain types split almost evenly across the map, and the disparity in elevation it causes. On the side of the US half is largely unobstructed rolling sand dunes. Few objects, natural or otherwise, are found between the three flags which inhabit it. This terrain type, despite the vast emptiness it conveys, does provide a largely enjoyable vehicular experience. The rolling dunes have such height that they provide good natural cover from rockets or other vehicles. Players need to keep an eye on their minimaps for potential enemies just on the other sides. This might not protect you anyway. Annoying as they may be given the often nefarious intentions of some players, bikes rushing across the desert can reach incredible speeds and leap over the dunes, landing near tanks looking to detonate. Even the speed of Battlefield 4's ground armor makes this terrain type unpredictable, as enemies can roll up on you quickly and in large numbers. This provides a moderately enjoyable game atmosphere and an adrenaline rush, at least when it's only the desert dunes involved. The problem with Silk Road, of course, is that this desert is only half of the map area. On the China side, the dunes give way to raised plateaus, granting a substantial height advantage. On the low ends of these cliffs, rock-filled canyons create voids for players and vehicles to traverse, although in these more restricted passes, ground armor can find itself at a significant disadvantage. Numerous slopes provide routes for tanks to approach the tops and fire down on the US side of the map with clear and unobstructed precision. The plateaus form a rocky, raised crescent, where within the center the D flag sits, the point which should be considered the middle of the map. This is the army base, and is an objective of considerable size, both in its flag radius and amount of military assets. Undoubtedly, the infantry flag of the map, it is usually fought over the entire round by infantry playing a cat-and-mouse game within. However, let's not kid ourselves. Given its position on the low flat surrounded by elevated hills, the Chinese team undeniably has the advantage here, as they are able to reinforce this objective far more quickly, scout and shoot rockets at US armor trying to break in, and, more often than not, have a clear line of sight at enemy infantry inside using thermal optics, and provide high ground support to hold the position. This advantage can also be utilized by US tanks when holding the high ground as well. The Army base flag also contains an air raid bunker, allowing a player to use the B-1 bomber call-in. When controlled by the China team, the emptiness of the desert leaves dramatically fewer places to hide from the airborne bombardment than the rocky cliffs of the north. Both of these terrain types come with their own major disadvantages. On the China side, the elevation bonus allows players to completely dominate US ground armor from afar. This is distinctly a result of Battlefield 4's weapons and mechanics. The design of ground armor in Battlefield 4 is no doubt stronger than in Battlefield 3, but this is a double-edged sword. To counterbalance this newfound strength, super effective and reliable weapons and tools for players of all skill levels are required, and what results is a certain cheesiness. These include an MBT Law rocket you barely need to aim, SRAs, and the notoriously long-range and high-damage Javelin launcher, made even more effective by laser designators. Compounding the infantry threat, ground armor has toys of their own. IFVs can lock toes to laser-guided targets, as can tanks with their absurd guided shells. Staff shells, which auto-lock ground targets much like the handheld MBT Law, have unlimited range and disable on hit. These weapon systems are game designs intended for balance purposes. Not that the rocket launcher design is a bad thing, as it certainly does make the Battlefield 4 armor infantry dynamic unique, but in vast unchecked quantities, it becomes immensely annoying, both in terms of its spammed frequency and its resulting high-pitched audio cacophony. The combination of this barrage can be overwhelming. The terrain advantage would not be so much of a giant annoyance if there was just something, somewhere to break the vast line of sight. But as it is, it provides such a significant advantage that China players can often push with ease into the desert flags under this rocket-filled covering fire, and repel countless US armor pushes into this side of the map. The US team is at such a disadvantage that the side is simply off-putting. While the Chinese team undoubtedly gets the benefit of the terrain advantage, these lock-on weapons are equal opportunity abuses. Even from the top of the dunes, the rocket barrage can be effective from as far as the other side of the map. Though the China side offers more cover in this respect, there are just not enough large obstacles to block line of sight and reduce the persistence of lock-on weapons from all sources. The US side is without question the end users of Beep Radio Central, but the China plateau can be its own death trap. The canyons allow for infantry to remain hidden for extended periods, and quick hit-and-run attacks on tanks can limit their effectiveness, even prevent them from moving out further into the map. Base contains can be painful on both sides. The largest issue is the poorly placed China main deployment. While not the most common scenario, this combination of rocky terrain, verticality, and a miserably designed choke point allows the US team to capture a few critical flags and lock the Chinese team down. Consider this section of the map. The China main is in the northwest corner. The flags of F and G are a moderate distance away, but they can only be reached after passing through a choke point. Even then, the split in the map terrain only gives a minor high ground path to the F flag. To reach G, the journey requires extra efforts through more low ground canyons, up another slope, and finally through yet another bottleneck at the G flag entrance. Simply losing the G flag, the fortification, can lead to a partial base camp. This isn't difficult to do either, as the plateau just above is a hot zone for close tank engagements. Given the amount of vehicles on Silk Road, up to 6 tanks and 5 IFVs possible for one team, breaking a base camp situation on either side is a tall order, but on the China team, it's an impossibility. The US side is not immune to containment following a full flag capture, but it is less constricted, being further back into the desert. Instead, the terrain advantage offered by the plateaus simply allows the Chinese team to shut down any breakout attempts from an absurd range, as newly respawning US armor trickle in one at a time. The majority of objectives on Silk Road are nothing to go crazy about, save for the aforementioned D flag. The rest are fairly basic in design and somewhat small, though I must give credit to the A, B, and C flags on the US side, which are distinct and yet conform to the desert environment. On the China side, a note must be made of the E flag, the radar station, which might rank among the most frustrating and difficult flags to capture in Battlefield 4. This is due to its moderate flag radius, its hilltop corner position which has choke points at both entrances, including an IED at one side, and numerous spawn point locations which utilize a vast quantity of cover within the objective zone. An IFV spawn can be grabbed by a hidden player immediately once it reappears, as it sits next to cover. The area is usually littered with landmines given the frequent traffic, and it remains hotly contested throughout a round for its high ground position. Finally, we do need to talk about vehicles. Silk Road is almost certainly the most ground armor heavy vehicle map in recent times, with the most since Bandar Desert in Battlefield 3. 10 tanks and 6 IFVs total. Of that, 2 of the tanks and 4 of the IFVs are found at flags around the map, everywhere but the army base. Typically, I argue that flag spawn vehicles are a bad gameplay mechanic, but here, given the fast-paced nature of the map, it sort of works to keep the intensity up. If it weren't for the terrain disparity or the poorly designed main base locations, this would complement the map nicely without giving one controlling team an absurd advantage. Nevertheless, the amount of tanks is refreshing even in its chaotic state. Silk Road does not possess any attack helicopters, making it one of the rare vehicle maps to make that decision. In this case, it's for the better, as it negates the need for any mobile AA. Instead, each team possesses 2 stealth jets and 2 scout helicopters. While the exceptionally flat terrain and non-existent obstacles make the scout helicopters target practice for tank shells and other rockets, the jets truly have the time of their lives. They are largely free to dogfight to their heart's content and usually without interruption. The limited effectiveness of stealth jets' laser-guided missiles means that they can sneak kills on already damaged armor, but struggle to kill anything at full health. That is, of course, except the bikes, which make tasty targets for hungry pilots. Because of the clear line of sight, open landscape, and lack of any weather effects, Silk Road became the best air supremacy map as well, letting dogfighters practice in a target-rich sky. The amount of bikes on the map is also notable. They significantly speed up gameplay and enemy encounters in vehicle form. Sorely needed as a means to transport infantry from point to point, they are frequently loaded up with mines or C4 and rammed into armored vehicles all round long. While this can be frustrating on the receiving end, it nevertheless is a source of enjoyment for some players, and not something which can be outright criticized due to the strength of the armor in BF4, and by the very nature of the sandbox gameplay which enables it. Silk Road is not a bad idea in principle. Battlefield 4 had vastly better armor mechanics regarding their speed, maneuverability, terrain sensitivity, and protection systems than Battlefield 3. And DICE's intent to make large vehicle-heavy maps to show these improvements off is clearly demonstrated by this map and many others in Battlefield 4. Having vehicle-dominated maps is not the issue. In fact, perhaps with a slightly larger scale with an added flag or 2 and a redesigned terrain layout, Silk Road may have actually worked very well. But getting there is a major challenge. I have attempted to shift flag positions and terrain types countless times in order to come up with a better solution, and to be honest, it's incredibly difficult in this instance. Ultimately, I have found that the 2 largest issues of the map, the elevation imbalance and the lack of any meaningful objects to block line of sight, can be solved, but the map would be drastically different from how it exists today. It comes down to its 2 terrain types, the plateaus, and the rolling desert of sand dunes. One of these needs to be eliminated. The dunes, without a high ground to gain an advantage from, is actually an excellent environment for fast-paced vehicle play, natural cover, and unexpected speedy surprises. Although they definitely give infantry a better fighting chance, the plateaus sort of neuter the speed of the vehicle game. I think the best solution would have been to go with a dune majority, keeping a largely rolling terrain across the entire landscape. Scattered sparingly throughout would have been a few very low plateaus for minor elevation changes, but with hillsides allowing tank access. Here, on these minor steps, anti-tank rocket players could have a slight vantage point over the dunes, but at least vehicle players would be able to guess where it's coming from and have a chance to use the dunes for cover. It would give Silk Road the feeling of a very modern East Asia version of 1942's Operation Aberdeen, where the tanks and vehicle play are the priority. But as I mentioned a minute ago, this is an entirely different map design from the existing Silk Road and is all theory crafting. What we are left with is a unique but fundamentally imbalanced map design in a literal sandbox. I cannot deny that there is enjoyment to the speed of the ground armor battles within the rolling dunes, or the effectiveness of the plentiful bikes which make for great target practice, provide great travel utility, and simultaneously infuriate armor players all game long. Nor should we ignore the fact that it is among the best maps in Battlefield 4 for fighter jet dogfighting, but the verticality split across the map and the lack of anything to break this line of sight problem is insane. It is intentionally designed map imbalance, plain and simple. The flaws of the design, coupled with Battlefield 4's lock-on mechanics for infantry and ground vehicles, has left Silk Road despised by many Battlefield players. Its legacy will be